All right, Jody, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining, everyone, and look forward to having this conversation. I'm a huge proponent of Microsoft Copilot and what it means to me personally as a worker, as someone who has to get stuff done and someone who has a long history of taking shortcuts, but yet finding success along the way. I think the world has made that okay. And it's made it so where we have tools now that are going to make that much more powerful than ever before around generative AI, generative being the key word. AI has been around a long time, but generative AI. I look forward to learning more about that as we have this conversation today with our partners at InSentra, who InSentra does a ton of work for us on the Microsoft side of things. We'll start by just a quick intro to the folks on the call here on the host side, a little bit about XenTegra, and we'll jump into Copilot and hopefully discuss some questions along the way. The person on the far left, that's me, Andy Whiteside. I'm the president, CEO, founder, chief enthusiast. That's what I call CEO, Chief Enthusiasm Officer. It is all about what we do as a partner to try to elevate our customers and our vendors to be more successful together, which includes this Copilot and generative AI thing. I'll start with Bill Sutton on the far right-hand side. Bill runs our modern workspace practice, and that includes all things end user. Copilot and generative AI tools will really run the gamut of our business practices, but it's going to be extremely valuable for the end user. And it's going to be interesting to see where this all goes and how users decide how they're going to take advantage of it. And lots of conversations out there around, is it going to replace people? Well, it's not going to replace the people who learn how to use it. Generative AI, the best. Bill, welcome to the podcast, the webinar. And any specifics around generative AI and Copilot that you want to highlight as it relates to you?
No, I would agree with everything you just said. I think Copilot's going to be a game changer for improving productivity and efficiency among pretty much the gamut of workers that use the Office 365 suite, which we'll dig into a little bit more here shortly.
And that's what's so amazing, right? You got the Office productivity suite that is just teed up perfectly, at least the online version and more, but the online version for sure, to be a killer as it relates to generative AI and Copilot.
Yes, sir.
Jody Elkins is the president of InSentra Americas. Jody and his team do a lot of work with us on the Microsoft side, and they specialize in that. We don't claim to be the smartest Microsoft guys. We've got some, and they can do some really interesting things. But when we need, big boy help, we turn to Jody and his team. Jody, welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Happy to be here. Excited. I love this topic. I started using Copilot specifically a few months ago, and it's just sort of incorporated itself into every part of my life. I use it on a daily basis at work. Teams chats and recaps are amazing, but I've also started using it on a personal side and planning vacations and driving directions to see different tourist attractions in Ireland. And I mean, you name it, anywhere I'm going, I use Copilot to help me gain some insight quickly. I have very limited time like you, Andy. So it's super helpful.
I love that you brought up the personal side because, whether it's work or personal, I get 10, 15 solicitations a day around somebody wanting to be my life coach. And my response is, I don't necessarily think I'm going to need one because I have generative AI to be my coach. Now, I still have to interpret what it's telling me and make my own decisions. But I think as a tool, a coach, an enabler, that's where generative AI is going to play a massive role.
Yeah.
Josh Pusateri, sorry, Josh, if I messed that up slightly again, I always do. Josh is our expert, and Josh is going to tell us how to apply all this stuff to our work world, and you'll probably be able to get some influence in your personal world as well out of it. But Josh, welcome to the webinar, and we look forward to hearing what you're talking to customers about as it relates to Copilot.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Josh, anything you would tee up before we go to the next couple slides around why Copilot, without stealing your own thunder, why it's important that people are taking advantage of Copilot early, often?
Yeah, I think you'll hear a lot from me soon. But I just want to add, I think Bill, you just mentioned Copilot will become a game changer, and I just want to add that I think it already has become a game changer for a lot of companies. Those who are using it now, it's just amazing what it's done with the efficiencies that people have found with it. So yeah, excited to talk more about it.
I heard someone say the other day they compared generative AI to digital currency and how it was the next great thing that was going to happen. And, digital currency may or may not ever get to where people believed it would get to. Generative AI as a tool, it is already there or becoming there. It's clear that it's gonna happen. A little review about XenTegra. We are a multifaceted company. We've got a Canadian group, which hopefully we have some Canadians on with us. We've got our India group, which hopefully we have some folks from India on as well. We have a group that focuses on government, so SLED, Fed, public sector related things, including community hospitals. We've got our small business group, which focuses on customers with sub 500 employees. And then we've got our managed services group, which includes support, managed services, and hosting. Lots of opportunities to have long-term success with customers there. And I know for a fact that team is leveraging generative AI already because it's the only scalable way to have a business like that. A little overview about us. We resell software, hardware products. We do strategic consulting services. I mentioned a minute ago just now that we can do managed services. That's probably the most lucrative part of our business, and where when we have that relationship with customers, we really succeed with them. Had a conversation with another vendor this morning that wants us to move customer X from X to, working with us with X and moving them to them. I'm like, guys, they're not unhappy customers because we worked with them. However, there's a lot of other customers that are potentially unhappy. And then finally, things that we do complimentary, whether it's conference passes, assessments. We even go in and do assessments for our own work. In other words, we'll have a consulting group of our own go in and do a project, and then we'll maybe 3 months later or 6 months later assess it, and just to get a check and see how things are going, see what's evolved, see what's changed, see what might have been not set up ideally correctly, because so many decision points in the decision tree. That's the type of partner we are. For us, it's all about building community, building a business model that allows us to build a community of customers, enable those customers in the spirit of true and sustainable partnership. I know that sounds like what every value-added reseller would say, but it's not true. And if it was, we wouldn't be in this business because there's that opportunity to prove that on a daily basis. We do fun things too. Trip to Hawaii, we're giving away in like 2 weeks. If you go out to workhasnoboundaries.com, you'll see your opportunity to register for that if you haven't already. There's still time to. All you do is you register for it. You take a meeting with us on some topic that you're interested in anyway. Could be Copilot, should be Copilot after this for sure. And then we have a conversation, and then boom, you're registered, and your chance of winning is quite high at this point. But that's the kind of stuff we do to add value, not only just for the need of it, for the education of it, but because it's just fun stuff we can do that, as a company that has funding coming in through great customers like some of you guys, we need to find ways to give back. And sometimes it could just be a trip to Hawaii for, talking to us about things you need to talk to us about anyway. We also do things like this. One of my favorite things, we have lots of great swag. You should never go to a XenTegra event and not walk out with swag that makes sense, that's usable, that you like. This is an image from our Microsoft Copilot hoodies. Take a meeting with us, talk to us about Copilot, get a hoodie. Lots of free technology t-shirts. Some of them aren't as I'll use the word cool as they could be. Some kind of dorky. I have this thing that if I can't wear it to a restaurant, a bar or something with my family, with my wife, then it's something I shouldn't have. But stuff we hand out is usually much better than that. And then we've, one of the examples of that are the hoodies that we're giving out here with Insentra and Microsoft around Copilot. These things are pretty cool to wear. XenTegra value add, complimentary assessments, education webinars, hands-on workshops, vendor-focused podcasts. We do a ton of podcasts. I think I still have one from yesterday. I got a post. We did 3 yesterday. And then extremely heavily discounted conference passes. ServiceNow conference is coming up in a couple of weeks, and we're on the verge of taking 60 customers that we provided conference passes to. If there's a conference you're trying to get to, reach out to your XenTegra client executive and find out if we have conference passes. And if we don't, we'll still probably figure out a way to at least discount it for you and make it more cost effective. With that, I'm gonna hand it over to Josh to go over the Microsoft Copilot and the reason why you guys are here.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Andy. Hey, everyone. I'm Josh Pusateri. As Andy mentioned, I'm a modern workplace solutions architect here at Insentra. I've worked in the Microsoft 365 space for probably over a decade at this point, doing a lot of architecture work around migrations, new implementations, things like that. And I'm really excited to talk to you all about Copilot today. So I also have an agenda. I know we just went over one, but just to go through this real quick, we'll look at what Copilot is, just at a very high level. And then I'll show you some nice use cases for how it can assist in your day-to-day work life. We'll go through how to enable Copilot, and then we'll talk about some of the important considerations to think about before you actually do enable it. And so at this point, I think everyone has probably heard of Copilot in some fashion. You probably know what it does, but I do just want to give just a quick recap for those out there that may not know. So Copilot is Microsoft's AI-powered chat companion, and there are several different modules of Copilot. The most popular is probably Copilot for Windows. It sits in your start menu, like a little search bar. It's what Cortana was in Windows 10. There's Copilot Chat in Edge, which is also consumer grade. It's a replacement for Bing Chat, probably most comparable to ChatGPT, which you've probably also heard about. There's Copilot for Sales. There's Copilot for Service. Those interface with CRM systems like Dynamics and Salesforce. And then there's what we're all here to talk about, which is Copilot for Microsoft 365. And so Copilot for M365, it takes the large language models used in other AIs like ChatGPT, and it combines that with your tenant data. So all the data that exists within your tenant, and that's all available through Microsoft Graph. So when prompts are given into Copilot, it uses both these large language models and your tenant data to provide answers. And this flowchart here kind of gets into a bit more detail on how that works. And I'm not going to actually spend time going through this. I'm scary to talk about, but we will share this out later, and you can view it, and happy to chat more one-on-one with how it actually works. But I do want to walk you through some of the different modules within Copilot for M365 and how you can use them. So specifically what you see up here in the top left, there's Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Teams. Those are the main components that people would use Copilot for M365 in. And before I do that, now you know what Copilot is. Andy, question for you. I'm curious, as a CEO, what's most intriguing or exciting to you about Copilot in a business?
Efficiency of my teams, whether that's consultants or sellers. I'll give you a quick example. One of my network guys came to me 3 months ago and said, "Hey, is AI, generative AI, going to replace me?" I'm like, I just looked at him dumbfounded. And then 2 or 3 days later, actually probably after doing the first webinar, I went back to him and said, "No, it's not going to replace you. It's going to allow you to be much more scalable and effective if you use it." I think one of the challenges I have as a business owner is determining who's using it and who's getting the most value out of it and who's not, and trying to find a way to make sure that I encourage them to use it, or I have to find other resources that will use it, because if we don't, we're going to get left behind.
Thanks. Yeah, Jody, I'm going to steal your thunder here. I think this is something you've mentioned a lot, but when someone says, will Copilot replace me? The answer is actually no. Someone will replace you that knows Copilot or that knows AI.
Yeah, someone using Copilot is going to replace you.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. So yeah, I'd love to just walk through a couple of examples here of how it could be used just every day. And so we'll go through module by module, just pretty high level here, just one or two examples for each. So we'll start with PowerPoint. And actually, before we get into PowerPoint specifically, I do want to mention that in all of these applications, once you turn on Copilot, there's actually a nice Copilot button that shows up in your toolbar in each of these apps. You can see it here in the top right. And what that does is it opens up a chat, which you can then feed it prompts from any of those applications. Copilot buttons also show up in places like documents, Word documents, inside of emails, which I'll show you in a minute as well. So when you click the button, the chat pops out. You can ask Copilot to do almost anything. There's also some predefined prompts, and those prompts actually change based on if it's a new document, if it already has text in there. So it changes based on the criteria. So in this example here, it was a new PowerPoint file, and Copilot was prompted to create a presentation based on an existing Word document, most likely in SharePoint or in OneDrive. So this is actually a really good first example of how powerful Copilot can be. It can call from different components within your tenant, like Word or email, to craft really whatever you need. So you can see here, it shows a design that could be adjusted or regenerated. And so at this point, if you're asking yourself, hey, did I use Copilot here to create this presentation? I didn't, but if I did, this is what it would look like. So I gave Copilot here a very simple prompt. I just fed it our agenda, and in seconds, it spit these slides out. And I think if I took more time with prompting it instead of just feeding it the agenda, maybe I could have given it a link to our blog entry on Copilot, to get more content. But I think this is a pretty good start. And that brings up a good point about prompting. We could talk hours about the art of prompting. And I think that's going to be the biggest learning curve around Copilot once people start getting used to it, is how to prompt effectively to get what they actually want out of it. So next up is Word. So in Word, the same side chat can pop out, like I mentioned, or when you highlight existing text, Copilot can then either rewrite the text, or it can visualize the text as a table if there's data within it. You can even choose different tones when rewriting. So in the bottom left, a prompt was given to draft a proposal from an existing meeting in OneNote, existing meeting notes. And it also included data from other Word documents as well. So just another example of how pulling from multiple data sources can be used to create new content. Next up, we have Excel.
Hey, Josh, I just had I have a great example from Word. I had
Sure.
a family friend actually that asked me just 2 weeks ago for a letter of recommendation. He was applying to a graduate program at a university I didn't have any experience with, didn't have any knowledge of. But it's a tough graduate program to get into. And he asked me if I could write a letter of recommendation. So I actually used Copilot in Word to write that. And it was amazing. It came back and grabbed all the history from the university, from the program itself. Of course, prompting, to your point earlier, it took me a few motions to actually get the right prompt and then some of the follow-up prompts. But I kept adjusting the document, and what would have taken me probably an hour and a half of research and another 30 minutes to write the document, I did all of this in about 15 minutes. And it was fantastic. One of the best letter recommendations I ever wrote.
And Jody,
That's awesome.
Did you write it and then run it through Copilot, or did you just feed Copilot and it just wrote it for you?
I wrote what I added to Word initially were the key components that I knew about this kid, right? I've known him since he was about 3 years old. And so, upstanding citizen, modest, brilliant, those types of adjectives to describe the type of person I was writing it for. And it generated initial, and then I went back and said, okay, now apply this program at this university, the key traits that they look for, or the key traits of the, all kinds of prompts. Like I said, there was a bit of an iterative approach on the prompting to gather the information that I wanted, but it kept updating the document, and it kept highlighting the pieces that it would update. So I wouldn't have to read the whole damn thing again. I could just key in on what changes were there. And then in some cases, I didn't like what it did. And so I would highlight that sentence and then just ask it to quickly rewrite it. And that would take about 1.5 seconds, and it would adjust it in a different tone or using different language vocabulary entirely.
And I would say that's probably something the average 10th grader would know these days.
Right.
But your history allowed you to feed it better context. So you combine
Correct.
those two, now you got a winning formula.
Agreed. Super powerful.
Yes. Now imagine applying that to, one of your customers where you have all their historical data in some form in 365, and having it write something based on that too, just to apply that to the work, to the work front. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example on that too. In our business, we're 100% services business, right? So when we have, let's say, one of Andy's clients that I'm reaching out to for whatever reason, I have to, before I do that, what I typically would do in the past is I'd go back and look in our CRM system and refresh my memory on all the different projects we may have delivered for XenTegra to that customer, and so that I could reference that. Well, I can do that today quite simply with Copilot. So I can write an email and say, please list all the projects, or I can pull it up separately and say, hey, give me all the projects that we've done for customer X. I can look at that very quickly, and I can dig into that further, so I understand what the size of that project was. Were there any challenges with that project? How did we overcome that project? Rather than trying to find the people that did the implementation and have that conversation and look at all the notes in CRM and in our SharePoint repository. It's a lot of time and effort that something that previously might take me or somebody that I might ask to do this research for me, it might take them 1 to 2 hours to actually gather all that data. I can do in a matter of minutes.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great example. All right, so we'll move on to Excel here. With Excel, you can actually do a lot of cool things, such as analyzing data sets without even writing a single line of code. So let's say you wanted to use Excel formulas or pivot tables and you never really knew how. You know, who really knows how to do those things? So now Copilot can do it for you. You can use it to analyze data in tables, things like that. So in this example here, Copilot analyzed similar data in a table, and it created a new sheet with some graphs to show its results to you. It could even analyze trends based on that data, which is pretty cool. Next up is Outlook. And so I like Outlook's features a lot, and I just wanted to make a note here that you actually need the new version of Outlook for this to work in Copilot. So Copilot does not work with the old version of Outlook. But here's a common scenario that you probably all came across. A long back and forth conversation through email took place. You were not included in this, but then at some point someone decided to add you. Either they forwarded it to you or they mentioned you. So now you're inside this chain. And instead of going back and scrolling through and reading the whole conversation, you can just use Copilot to summarize it all for you. You could even call out any action items that were given as part of that. And so in this example here, actually, Copilot was used to help draft a new email. And it can also be used to rewrite text in different tones, very similar to what it does in Word. And then the last module here, and this is my favorite and probably everyone's favorite, is Copilot in Teams meetings. And if any of you have spoken to anyone about Copilot who has used it and you ask them what their favorite feature is, I think 99 to 100% of them will say this is the #1 feature that they've used so far. And so there's 2 main ways to use Copilot from inside Teams meetings. The first is during a meeting, and then the second is after a meeting is over. So first, let's take a look at the left of the screen here. That's during a meeting. Let's say you come to a meeting 10 minutes late. Copilot will actually pop up automatically when you join and ask you if you want a recap of the meeting. And I've used this a bunch. I know a lot of people have used this a bunch of times. It gives you bulleted updates of what's happened in the meeting so far, and it helps get you up to speed so you don't have to waste your time with someone explaining it all to you once you join. And then on the right side, you'll see an example of Copilot after the meeting is over. So let's say you missed a meeting or you just didn't take good notes during the meeting. Copilot can summarize the entire meeting for you. It can list action items. It can even offer follow-up questions. And I'll add here that all of this only works if the meeting is either recorded or transcribed, which is pretty commonplace now once Copilot is turned on. So when Copilot responds with the transcription content, it actually highlights who the speakers were, and it knows who made the action items and who they are for. So you'll see on the left here, it mentions Serena and Beth plan to follow up. So it calls them out as, knowing who spoke and who's taking the action there. And I'll also add in all of these scenarios that we talked about, Copilot always provides a reference link to where the data is taken from. So you'll see a footnote next to every sentence or every topic, and you can actually click on the footnote and it would bring you back to either the line in the transcript or to the document where its response was taken from.
Hey, Josh,
and so
if you don't mind, go back to that last slide, if you don't mind. I just want to point something out that has been super helpful to me. That second box from the left, if you look at the question that was asked there, how does the group feel about the inventory status? I use this quite a bit, actually, because I can't be on every call, but I'm all about leadership and culture. And so culture is #1 in our organization. It is the most important thing. So I want to know, even the meetings that I'm not on, I want to know what was the general feeling. And Copilot does a really amazing job of capturing that, not only the facts and the artifacts of the call, but how did people feel about it? Was there an argument? Was there a debate? Was there disagreement? Did that get resolved? And how were people feeling? It's really, really powerful. It gives you all the context, or a lot of the context, I should say, that you can't get otherwise.
But it's a struggle for me because I know I should be leveraging that tool. It's like, it's like having a tool in their tool shed, or maybe a toy. Like I have lots of toys around my world that I only use once or twice a year, like a jet ski. And it bothers me when it's sunny outside on a weekday even, that I'm not using those tools. Same thing here with what generative AI is bringing to me, Copilot. I know it's there waiting for me to use, and it's irresponsible for me not to be using it.
Yeah, and I think we're when we're talking about the word stuff too, or the Outlook piece. There's Josh mentioned, to your point, Andy. Josh mentioned that everybody's favorite piece is Teams, and that was the last time we did a webinar like this. Was a couple of months ago, and my favorite was absolutely Teams, and it was these types of features. And the example he provided first was one of the first examples I had of using Copilot in an executive call that I was late for. It was amazing. But I'll tell you, one of my favorites now is actually the Outlook functionality of recapping a thread. As you can imagine, in my role, I get a lot of, escalations. When an escalation takes place, by the time an email comes to me, that thread can be, days, weeks, months sometimes of an email thread with lots of context. That happens a fair amount. And so I can quickly ask Copilot to, hey, recap this for me and give me the highlights. And in a couple of minutes, as opposed to sometimes what used to be a 15 or 20-minute read, I can understand what the gist is, and I know who I now need to go talk to, and ultimately what I need to accomplish. It's pretty powerful. So as the point is there, if you don't use it, you don't learn how to write it well, right? And I've started using it more and more and more, and I have a new favorite piece every week now.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up was, as Josh has gone through this, he's referenced PowerPoint, Word, Excel, Outlook, and Teams, right? Those are all applications that your end users are using. So one of the key advantages here is the ability of Copilot to, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but look at your data, leverage your data, things that you have created or been created in your organization to which you have access, that's feeding the responses that you get from prompts to Copilot. So this is not coming from some external large language model and getting generalizations about topics. It's leveraging the data that you've already created. You might have created it 6 months ago. You might have created it 6 days ago. Doesn't matter. It's part of that magical Microsoft graph, right, Josh?
Yep, exactly. Yeah,
So
good
I think
point.
that's an important thing for folks on the call, on the webinar, to consider, to understand that this is not just another generative AI tool. This is leveraging your data and really giving you actionable information based on information you've created or others have created in your organization.
Yeah, great point, Bill.
Yeah. Great. And to Jody's point earlier about Outlook, actually, I do want to cover a couple of updates. So we did, as Jody mentioned, ran a webinar similar to this. It was probably a month or two ago. And so I just want to highlight some of the updates here that had happened in that time, since that time. I feel like every week there's something new being announced with Copilot. It's just constantly changing and evolving. So I did call out a couple of bullets, and one of them is Outlook related. I'm curious, Jody, if you've used this in Outlook now, but in the example and also what you shared, you've used it within the messages itself. Now you can actually use it in Copilot in Outlook, the application itself. So now there's the chat function that you have in other applications that was never there, and now it is. So you can use it for things like searching for emails or summarizing emails from your past day, or outlining emails in your inbox that are unread that may have action items, things like that. So it's beyond just the message itself. It actually looks at the whole Outlook, and you can prompt it to do things like that, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, I'm always
And then,
surprised every time I ask it to highlight something I need to pay attention to that I haven't read, something to that effect. I'm always surprised at how many I've missed that day. Super helpful.
But all the efficiencies now give you more time to reply to those things.
Right.
So yeah, just a couple other updates here just to share. In the past couple months, Copilot's now accessible through the mobile apps, which is pretty nice. So you can take it on the go as well. And line 4 here, when it first came out, caught my eye: restricted SharePoint access. This function disables company-wide search, and it lets you scope and limit which sites Copilot can access. And this will make a lot more sense once we get into the data side of things and what data Copilot can actually access. But once you dig more into this feature, it actually, Copilot still does look beyond just that scope. And so it doesn't really lock it down as much as you'd think it would. And it doesn't eliminate the need to actually properly secure your environment, which is something we'll also talk about in a couple slides here. And another big update here is that Copilot for Security came out of preview, and it's now hit GA. And I haven't used it yet, but it seems very powerful. Great for administrators. It can be used to help resolve incidents, view policies, find user risks, things like that. Really make your tenant more secure. And again, these are only from the past month, so there's so many new features coming on the roadmap. It's just crazy how fast this tool is evolving. And so if everything we've looked at so far sounds great, you're probably asking, well, how do I start using it? And it's actually pretty simple. It's licensed per user as an add-on. So you'll need either a minimum of business standard or business premium, or an Office or Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. You'd also obviously need to have the M365 apps installed to use Copilot within the applications. Otherwise, you can just use it on the web.
So Josh,
the web version of Copilot.
Because that's where I've found it interesting. So if I'm using O365 online apps, it's like native, intuitive. If I install the apps from O365 online, if I install them local, there is something in that or something that triggers Copilot to be enabled in those offline apps or those locally installed apps?
Yeah, so once the license is applied to the user, it puts that button in that I was talking about. So the little Copilot button sits in your taskbar. I think it's all the way on the right, just in your home taskbar at the top of each application. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all those. Yeah.
You know what? I've been doing this for a while now. I thought it was limited to online. That helped me immensely. Like I've got Excel open on another page, another screen right now, 20,000 lines.
See it?
And I just saw Copilot right there.
Perfect. One happy customer. Awesome. Yeah, and just some other key points for enabling. Again, like I said, it is per user, so you don't have to license the whole tenant. When you license the user, it just gives that user access to Copilot. And it will actually get more into that in a minute because that drives the whole security conversation. It is recommended when you are applying the license to users that you use it for people who are using multiple data points. So not just email or not just OneDrive, but also SharePoint and Teams. Only because the more data that exists for that user, the better Copilot will perform. The more data it has to return its results to you. And so hopefully this all sounds like great news. If you're getting ready to hit that apply button, just hold on one more second because we have a couple more slides here to talk about that I think are pretty important. And so Jody, a question for you, and everyone else out there, you can also think about what this answer is, but what do you think the most common first question is that someone asks once they access Copilot?
It's typically something about salary. What is the CEO? How much does the CEO make? But yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah, I've heard the same. What is the CEO's salary? So knowing that's what that is, what are some of the risks you see that could be associated with just turning Copilot on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is, I'm a former CIO, and I've known, as all IT organizations have known for a long time, that we all need to be doing a better job around data governance. And when we think about information architecture, we know that we should be doing better than we're able to. But the businesses in general have never really been behind that because they look at everything in terms of risk. And before Copilot, if somebody had access to something that they shouldn't have access to, the risk was mitigated because those people would have to actually go try to find that in order to realize they had access to it. And so, while it's not the best situation, most businesses, certainly in the CIO roles that I was in, most of those businesses chose to say, you know what, we're going to accept that's an acceptable risk level. We don't want to go spend the time and money we have to actually do this properly. Now, this is a game changer because Copilot doesn't know whether you should have access or shouldn't, and never will. It is simply going to instantly access every piece of data that you have access to, whether you should or not. And that is a game changer for a lot of organizations, both from an internal perspective and a leakage of intellectual property perspective and security perspective, you name it. So that's where I think the rubber really meets the road, and that's sort of the real world application of Copilot that we thought was important to do these webinars to help everyone understand. It's a fantastic tool, and it's absolutely something we're using. It's absolutely something we encourage. But it comes with some risk if you don't do the work you need to be doing. What we've been seeing, here's the good news and all that, what we've been seeing in organizations is that now that risk is no longer mitigated, and the business wants to take advantage of the capabilities of Copilot and generative AI in general. And so now they are releasing those funds and backing those types of things so that IT can do the things that we've always known we need to be doing.
Awesome. Yeah, those are great points. And we'll actually dig into a lot of that a little more too, just, overall security concerns and considerations. Yeah. And so this graphic here is actually pulled right from Microsoft, and I just want to look at just that bottom sentence. And this kind of highlights everything that Jody was just talking about. It says users will only be able to search the information they already have access to. And so it's that already have access to that makes a huge assumption that users actually do only have access to that data that they should. And the truth is that they probably don't. They probably have access to a lot more. And I'll give you a quick example. It's a pretty common one. So by default, when a new tenant is created, there's actually a SharePoint site and a team site that are created, and all members are members automatically. They're all granted access. And so I've worked with customers who just never touch this team or site. They don't want to delete it. They don't want to change the permissions because they don't know if it may break something, or there may be some root level, something going on there that if they delete it, then their whole SharePoint farm will be deleted. So it's just kept there, and let's say the new tenant gets stood up. Someone decides this is a great place to store public HR data. So things like code of conduct, leave policies, benefit information, things that should be put in a global SharePoint site, right? Now, let's say fast forward a few months later, company grows, new staff is hired, then someone sees that folder called HR in this team and says, hey, I'm going to create a folder here called personnel, and maybe I'll store all the HR PII data, social security numbers, salary information, confidential performance review notes. No users would know that they have access to that folder unless they start digging around for it. It's kind of hard in general in SharePoint to know that you have access to something without a direct link to it. And so people may have access to all this data they didn't know, but now Copilot knows. You turn Copilot on, and that data will then get returned in prompts from those users. So going back to that first question, the common question of what's the CEO's salary, that it could return a real result if you have access, but don't know you do. Another quick example that I'd come across pretty recently is one of the primary suggested prompts when you first use Copilot is for you to ask for to tell me the latest about a colleague. And usually that returns things like files they've shared with you, emails they've sent you. But if you have all this access, it could also return performance review comments that other people made or things like that. So it's definitely a big risk there to just turn it on. So the next question you have may be, well, how do I ensure this doesn't happen? How do I make sure that users only have access to the data that they should? And this is what we call just enough access. And there's several features that Jody mentioned, and we'll talk more on the slide here about what can be configured to make sure that you offer that just enough access. And so the goal of all of these topics here, or most of these topics, is to prevent oversharing. And again, ensure that users only have access to that data that they should. And so a lot of these probably look familiar. They're probably topics, like Jody said, you may have dismissed in the past. They're always considered advanced features, and Microsoft actually always build them as advanced features. Maybe you thought, oh, my tenant doesn't need that. We're in good shape. But now these things like information protection, data classification, labeling, through Microsoft Purview, DLP, data loss prevention policies, these are all necessary to protect all that information once you have Copilot enabled. So you can use labeling, for example, to decide who has access to certain data when a label is applied, or whether data can be shared internally or externally. So these are pretty good ways to make sure that data is protected. It's also important to look at your existing SharePoint sharing settings and your access control policies and who has access to, to each site, just to make sure no one is a member of a site they shouldn't be. And this goes along the lines of information architecture, making sure there's a detailed taxonomy for categorizing and organizing all your data. So for example, keeping finance data in the finance site, HR data in the HR site, and not crossing that over, and making sure those sites are then locked down. So Copilot will take into account all of these things. So all the labeling classification, DLP policies, once you have them all set up, it would never reveal any information to users that it shouldn't. So it does follow the guides that you put in place and the settings you put in place with all the proper governance and security and compliance settings. So you really have to make sure your house is in order, as some say, before you enable Copilot. So even if you turn it on for one user, you say, oh, I'll just turn it on for one person, it'll be safe. That whatever that person has at least view access to is seen by Copilot the second you turn it on. So that's just pretty important to remember. And then one last topic, outside of just securing your data, a key thing is looking at the data itself. So Copilot won't distinguish between data created yesterday or data created 10 years ago, right? So if there are old documents with outdated information, Copilot could still return those results to you where it thinks it's accurate, but it's just factually wrong. So obviously, you've done this with AI. If you've used, let's say, ChatGPT, you always want to fact check, right? Validate the output. And Copilot does provide those sources, but it is still best to make sure you clean up all that data. We call it rot data, redundant, obsolete, trivial. Archive it, purge it, right? Get it off your production environment so it doesn't get those results returned. I think training your staff, on good data hygiene is also important. So not keeping multiple copies or multiple versions just helps Copilot return better results as well. So really, if you had to take one thing away from this slide, it's the fact that people probably have more access to data than they should. And you should really find that out before turning Copilot on and not after.
Yeah, they've had access forever. It wasn't systematically done, therefore it went unnoticed, which, to some
Yep.
degree, this is, well, obviously you want to be ahead of the curve on finding out.
Definitely. Yeah. And if you're thinking, hey, this all sounds great, what can we do next? I'm gonna actually pass it back to Jody here, and she could talk about where we can go from here.
Yeah, so we do a lot of Copilot readiness assessments, and there's a number of different ways we can start. As you can imagine, every organization that we talk to is in a different place from a maturity level, and as an organization, a maturity level of their adoption of 365, maturity of their adoption of advanced information architecture and data governance policies, those types of things. So we kind of broke things up into make it really simple for customers to engage us. And the first thing that we like to do is we just call a free power hour. And there's a couple of different ways that we can start there.
Jody, did you just say the word free?
I did.
There's no way that most of our customers and clients we interact with shouldn't at least want to take us up on that. It's almost irresponsible not to learn more about what we've covered today.
I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the reasons we made it at no cost. We think there's a lot of information out there. There's not a whole lot of information in terms of the risks associated with it. Everybody gets really hyped about new technology, and Copilot is on steroids from that perspective, as far as I'm concerned. And that's fantastic. It will drive adoption. But it also creates a lot of risk, and those are the things that, as a former, when I was a CIO, that's all I was about was risk management, and I can't ever get that out of my head. So it's important that we understand what it is we're about to get into. So we can start that in a few different ways. All you need to do is reach out to your XenTegra rep, and you get a free Copilot hoodie by even doing this. We'll take a meeting with you. We can start in a couple of different places. If your organization or the folks that you want to bring on your call, if they don't know nothing about Copilot, we can do a free power hour that starts there. If they understand what Copilot is, but want to peel back the onion a little bit, like the graph slide that Josh was showing, and really get into the weeds a little bit in terms of how it actually functions, we can start there. So we can kind of meet your organization where you're at for that initial conversation, and then determine and align together and determine what's the best next steps for you. Every organization is a little bit different. I wouldn't say we have a number of customers we're helping in this space. I wouldn't say any two of them look exactly the same.
Yep, absolutely. This goes almost without saying, but there's a lot of uniformity to how people are using or misusing or not leveraging Copilot. But as Jody just pointed out, at some point you're going to become your own unique case every time. So with that, Bill, I haven't actually been monitoring the chat window. The questions, was there anything that came in that you saw?
No, nothing came in that I saw.
Okay. So guys, now's your time. We got a minute or two left here. Now's your time to ask questions if you have them. Jody and Josh, thank you for jumping on and having this conversation. Again, I feel neglectful myself personally for not spending more time leveraging Copilot and learning. It's almost like I had this moment just an hour or two ago. I know Excel is an extremely powerful tool. I only learned a fraction of it, which is probably more than most people did in college. I took an Excel programming class. I learned a ton there, but still a fraction of what it can do. I think Copilot's gonna be the same thing. It's extremely powerful. And just like I had the moment a minute ago that I really should have put more into Excel back in the day and stayed up with it. Copilot is one of those things where you don't want to miss the opportunity to have that learning curve and stay with it.
Yeah, agreed. And Josh pointed out the prompting is really important to learn. That's probably the most challenging aspect. And universities are now beginning to create programs specifically around prompt engineering. So we're in its infancy.
Yeah, there's also, I didn't have time to cover this here. There's 20, 30 more slides we could have talked about, but there's something called Copilot Lab, which everyone has access to once they have a Copilot license. And it actually gives you more prompt suggestions for each application. It gets into, what it can do and things like that. So yeah, that could also help out.
Yeah, it's helped me a lot. I use it quite a bit.
Yeah.
All right, let me check questions one more time here. Yeah, I don't have anything at the moment. Guys, thank you for doing this. We'll get it recorded and posted and use it as a reference a lot, really, because I'm sure this conversation is going to be teed up over and over again.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time, Andy
Great.
and Bill
Thank you.
and customers. Appreciate your time. Hope it was valuable. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.